And now back to our top story, the United States' major military campaign in Afghanistan. Its success or failure depends heavily on the performance and cooperation of America's warfighting partner, NATO. NATO's chief is its Secretary-General, Jaap de Hoop Scheffer. He joined Lateline earlier from Brussels. Welcome to the program. We've heard that today's mission in Afghanistan is the first operation under the new military strategy of the Obama administration. What's the significance of it starting in the Helmand province?
Well, it is clear that in Helmand province and in the southern part of Afghanistan more in general, the challenges are still huge. So I'm not surprised that in the framework of these operations, the choice has been made for Helmand.
We know that the Helmand province is home to much of Afghanistan's drug trade, which in large part funds the Taliban. If NATO and its forces wipe out that trade, does it stand to reason that the Taliban will crumble?
Well, it's counter-narcotics and NATO is a subject which is not as easy as it seems, in the sense that NATO and NATO forces do not have prime responsibility. By the way, if you look at the latest United Nations figures, the situation is better concerning narcotics than it was. We are not there yet. NATO forces are supporting anti-drugs and anti-narcotics policy. NATO forces can, as you might know, now also act with the Afghan forces, by the way, and after consulting them, against precursors and drug laboratories, but NATO forces are not in the forefront in the counter-narcotics operations. But I agree with you. It is a very important element, of course.
How do the locals living in the Helmand province view the US and its allies, as enemies or as friends?
I think I just spoke here in Brussels with the Afghan ambassador. I think on the whole, a large majority of the Afghan people are very supportive of the presence of the international forces in Afghanistan. They are and they were, so we do what we do with their support. It is critical, of course, in our presence and to keep the support in the hearts and minds, as we say, of the Afghan people, be it in Helmand, be it elsewhere, that we are very prudent, as you have heard John McChrystal, the new commander of the ISAF forces, say very clearly over the past few weeks, that we are very prudent how we go about civilian casualties, and that we avoid making civilian casualties at almost all costs. Entirely avoid it will unfortunately not be possible, but we are, and we have to be, as prudent as we can in this regard. Otherwise, we'll lose the hearts and minds of the Afghan people, and that would, of course, be too high a price.
But how hard is it to do that when NATO forces are fighting insurgents who blend into the local population?
Well, you're right in mentioning the notion counterinsurgency, because counterinsurgency is a very complex, not only complex word, but it's very complex on the whole, because as the former United Kingdom General Rupert Smith said, you are basically fighting a war amongst the people. Counterinsurgency, secondly, means as much civilian as it means military. Counterinsurgency needs the closest cooperation possible and the closest integration, I would say, between the civilian and the military. I think, by the way, that you, as Australian forces in Uruzgan, I visited your forces only 2 weeks ago, are, with the Dutch, my compatriots, giving an excellent example of combining and integrating the civilian and the military, but having an efficient and effective counterinsurgency strategy is a complicated affair. But I say again, you as Aussies are doing fairly well in this regard, and I respect you for that.
Given the challenges you outline, is it realistic then for the US to claim that civilian casualties can be kept down?
I think we are doing a lot better in this regard if you look at the figures than we did last year. I stress again, zero civilian casualties will unfortunately not be possible, but as I always tell President Karzai and the Afghan people, every loss of innocent civilian life is dramatic. I'll be the first one to apologize if it is in our hands to prevent it, or if it is through our actions that loss of innocent civilian life was caused. Zero will not be possible, but we are as prudent as we can. And again, I refer to General McChrystal's remarks about civilian casualties, about the ISAF approach, about the US, the American approach. And I think we have made great progress there, and that was absolutely necessary, I can tell you, because there might be times when we have not been prudent enough, and we should be prudent.
Australia, as you mentioned, has been involved in Afghanistan from the start, and we've seen the death and injury toll of Australian troops rise steadily, particularly in recent times. How do you foresee the death toll for NATO and its allies as this new strategy unfolds?
Well, that's a difficult one, but I think here again one should try to be realistic. We see a fundamental and important surge, US surge, on the military side, by the way, also on the civilian side. But if I focus on the military side now, given your question, I do think that we should expect a very heavy fighting season, given the fact that our forces will go where they have never been before, that we'll see more contacts with the enemy. You mentioned the operation in Helmand already, going on as we speak. So I think we should be prepared for a heavy fighting season, and that means that we should also be prepared for loss of life. And I do think that it's an important notion, because we should, as I think your government has always been, by the way, in Australia, we should be open and honest, fair and transparent to the people in Parliament and in public opinion whose support we need dearly for this important operation. We need their support. It is an important operation, but to get that support, I think you better be honest and fair and open to public opinion than hide these facts. An intensive fighting season will also mean, unfortunately and dramatically, casualties.
Afghanistan will have presidential and provincial council elections on the 20th of August. How crucial is today's mission, and presumably the follow-ups that we'll see rolling out over the next few weeks, to that election?
I think you're rightly using the word crucial in the framework of your question on elections. I think these elections are an important litmus test for Afghanistan, for the transparency, the credibility of those elections, but at the same time they're a very important test for us. And with us, I do not mean exclusively NATO or ISAF, but I mean the international community in its totality. We had elections in Afghanistan 5 years ago. We have seen progress in Afghanistan. It is now of crucial importance, and I use the words again deliberately, that these elections are credible, that they are transparent, that they are as free, as fair as they can be. And we in ISAF will do everything we can in our role of the protector with the Afghan National Army, with the Afghan National Police, in our role in giving, within